Okay, as we move into the book and look portions of the lesson for this week, we're going to be studying two separate passages. One is going to be in Romans, and one is going to be in Daniel. And both of these passages are really interesting that they would talk about submitting to authorities because both of them live in a non theocracy. There's not the situation here that either one of these authors find themselves living in a state where Christianity is the dominant religion and there's acceptance and it's embraced in any way. That's just not the case. In Romans, what you find is whenever Paul wrote the letter to the Romans, previous to his letter, there was a great persecution where the Jews were driven out of Rome, and now at this point, whenever he wrote the letter, they have been allowed to begin coming back in, and there's somewhat of a tolerance, not full acceptance, but there is somewhat of a tolerance, and so, but Paul is telling them that they still need to be subject to the governing authorities. And, in Rome, Caesar would have set up himself as not only the emperor, but as God. He was a deity. Your allegiance would have been to Caesar and Caesar alone. And that's why, even back in the Gospels, they would test Jesus and say, that they brought him the coin and ask if he should pay the tax, and he says, "Render unto Caesar's what is Caesar, and unto God's what is God's." And so, at any rate, that's the situation you find yourself in Rome at the time of this letter that was written. And then also in Daniel, Daniel finds him in a place of captivity. And the Israelite people have been brought into captivity and sitting under a king that God eventually humbles because he has exalted himself to the place and said, all of this that I have made for myself and is all for my glory and honor. And God takes Nebuchadnezzar out, and he ends up acting like an animal and all of those kind of things, kind of losing his mind till he humbles himself and exalts God in that scenario. So whenever we come to the first passage in Romans, let me grab my Bible here, and I'm just going to turn to that and read it for you really quickly. I should have already done that, but I haven't, so you can watch me turn pages. It's going to be Romans chapter 13. We're going to read verses 1 through 5. It says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist that have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for you. He is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience." So as we look at this passage, we really don't want this to remain, obviously, theory for the students. They understand intellectually that they are to submit to authority. All of the students are going to understand that. But in practicality, they don't always live that out, right? In practicality, we have a real struggle living that out because there are authorities that are appointed over us at times, and we have difficulty submitting to them because we feel like they're wrong or whatever. And so this is one that we have an opportunity to really bring home for them. The first question we have is, who is this commanded for? And in the very first two words of the passage, it says everyone, or every person. So there are no exceptions to the rule. Everyone has to live under the authority of someone else. In a job, we have the authority of the employer. If you own your own business, you have the authority of the government regulating your business. If In the church, we have people that are over us. Brother Spencer is the authority placed over me, um, and so all of these. Everyone has authorities that has been placed over them. For our students, especially, they find authority in their parents. They find authority in the school system. For teachers, they find authority um, in a job if they have job. So, we need to make it relevant to them and make sure they understand who their authorities are. But the fact that they do not escape being under the authority of someone. It doesn't matter how much freedom you think you have, you're still under the authority of someone. Question number 2, what is the command? To be subject to the governing authorities. Okay? You're probably going to have, there are definitely going to be some students in our student ministry this Sunday that have had run-ins with the law. Um, you know, I don't know how you get into that tactfully, but at any rate, there has to be an understanding of these students that the authorities in our local government, the police department, the laws of our state that have been put down by the General Assembly in Jeff City, like all of those things have sway over their lives, and they're not a bad thing. They're a very good thing. Because the next question says who are the governing authorities? It's those instituted by God. Now, it's hard whenever you look at our government to say whether it's local government or the national government and say that's instituted by God, but it is. He placed it there, and just like has gone throughout history, he can either keep those established or he can remove them and replace them. But whenever we submit to the governing authorities, we're submitting to God. It says, what is the purpose of the governing authorities? To be a terror to bad conduct, to commend good conduct, and to be God's servant for your good. This should be a real encouragement, hopefully, to the students. And because there is a blessing, there is good purpose in doing and obeying the laws of our land. And so, even though there are the exceptions, that there are moments when there are individuals in the government that we would not consider good or beneficial to us. Overall, our system of government, especially in America, I think would be considered the best in the world. So, I'm losing my train of thought, so I'm going to stop this for a second, and I'll pick back up in just a second.